Greetings, housemates, and welcome to Learn to Play Total War Warhammer. I'm Phwop, and this is going to be a brief faction overlook where I introduce each of the factions that currently exists. This is like week 1, and we talk a little bit about their play style so you can get an idea of who you might want to start off learning to play, because each faction has a decent amount to learn about it. They may actually appear more similar than they are at first. The subtleties emerge as you get into their tech trees and heroes and whatnot. So, let's begin with the Empire. If you want to do some of everything, the Empire is there for you. They've got access to strong magic, they've got strong infantry, they've got strong cavalry, they've got siege weapons. They've got a little bit of everything. Their unique mechanics are not very challenging and are, fairly rewarding. And their playstyle allows you to do plenty of diplomacy while dealing with all of the other races on the planet. It says the initial challenge is normal. I would say that is completely accurate. If you want to look at the heroes they have, these are the legendary lords. Your legendary lord can never be killed, will only be wounded when defeated in battle, whereas all of your other characters can die the true death should they go down on the battlefield. These guys will keep coming back, so they're kind of the core of your power as they bring their experience back from the dead over and over again. Karl Franz is a excellent military general. He improves the leadership of all troops under his command slightly, and comes with the faction effect of extra movement range for everyone. That includes your agents, aka heroes, and your lords, aka armies, on the campaign map, while also reducing by 10% the upkeep for Reichsguard, shock cavalry, and for the greatsword anti-infantry units. He's all around solid. He's excellent in melee combat and can be turned into a true melee beast. I think he can also become a ranged flying unit if you get his Griffin upgrade. But all in all, a powerful melee fighter, good leader, and his bonuses are all quite solid. The other Empire legendary lord is Balthasar Gelt. He is a wizard lord. He comes with Lore of Metal, which is otherwise unavailable to the Empire faction, and can get a Flying Pegasus mount. And as a wizard who needs to get close-ish to the enemy to cast his spells, but doesn't want to get trapped by anyone, a flying mount is a big boon. He also allows you to recruit one extra battle wizard while reducing the upkeep for all battle wizard heroes. And it doesn't mention it here, but his lord trait is that if he is in the province where you recruit a battle wizard, it is 2 levels higher than normal, and he can spec into that a bit so that battle wizards that he recruits are 4 levels higher than normal. I believe he has to be assigned to the settlement where you recruit the wizard, but he might just have to be in the province or region. So he starts off with siege artillery, a greatsword unit, and some of these light cavalry missile units, whereas Karl Franz starts off with these heavy shock cavalry Reichsguard, which are real brutal at the beginning, missile infantry, and some halberdiers. I would say that the Empire's ability to do everything makes it a solid starting choice. Especially if you like to form formations, you like to know what things do intuitively, because they're all based on pretty standard military units, except for maybe the Ark of the Covenant special unit that they get. Alright, so let's move on to the dwarfs. The dwarfs are great defensive units. They excel at defending. They all have magic resistance. They basically can't use magic, though they do get runesmiths who have powerful special abilities but the actual casting system they have no access to, which makes them a bit easier to master. And it does say initial challenge easy over here. The units are tough. They don't have too many of them, but they're all pretty tough. Most of them are incredibly heavily armored, reducing the damage they take from scores of other units. They do have, it says, a strong economy and trade options. It does take a little understanding of the trade system to know how that works, but it is true. They can have a really powerful economy compared to some other races based on their settlements. They do have a large technology tree, probably the most technologies out of all the races, and they have more benefits to research available to them through various skill trees than most other ones. They do lack cavalry, which also makes their gameplay a bit easier, but they have these flying helicopter war machine things, and a plethora of nasty ranged options like cannons and crossbowmen and riflemen. All in all, quite awesome. And like orcs, they can use the underway to basically teleport around the map, though there is a chance you can be intercepted, and should you be intercepted, you cannot retreat. So it's you better hope you can whip anyone who's going to intercept you. But it does let you jump over or under mountains, that is. And lastly, they get a lot of little mini quests whenever someone wrongs them by defeating an army or sacking a town or breaking diplomacy with them. You are assigned a mini quest to defeat them in exchange for some gold. And you do have to clear out every single grudge before you can win the game, which I think is pretty hilarious and turns out to be a nice little source of cash. Alright, so the leaders of the Dwarven faction, Thorgrim Grudgebearer is the faction leader. That just means that everything you do in his name, whether you're this hero or the other one. He's a powerful melee fighter and leader. This is true. The dwarf legendary lords are really powerful melee heroes. I think they can probably become some of the strongest melee heroes in the game. They have significantly more health than most heroes by about 30%, most melee heroes. And their ability to spec into battle skills is pretty strong. Thorgrim comes with reduced construction costs for military recruitment buildings, which is nice, and pays off a lot towards the end game, but it's not a huge bonus at the beginning. And by the end, you have a lot. You must have a stronger infrastructure than normal. Still, it never hurts. And the upkeep for Longbeards and Hammerers is cheaper in all of your armies. Longbeards being your solid, your upgraded basic infantry, and Hammerers being basically your armor-piercing your armor-piercing infantry, anti-armor infantry. Excuse me. On the other hand, you have Ungrim Iron Fist. He is a powerful melee fighter. Yes, he can spec into a really brutal warrior. He has a lot of skill point sinks that increase his damage against large units, against demon units, against orcs. In general, increases it lots and lots of damage. Probably one of the most damage-dealing heroes in the whole game. And he focuses, his faction effects are all about Slayer units, which are these dwarven berserkers, which will fight even beyond death. They get one final brutal attack when they would die. Their recruitment cost is reduced by 25% and their upkeep by 50%, and they are very high-tier dwarf units. Alright, so that wraps it up for the dwarves. Let's get out of here before he screams again. Alright, the greenskins. The greenskins need to stay constantly in battle. They have generally large numbers of troops in each unit. Their goblin units are cowardly, but they're pretty fast, and they make excellent hit and run units or just cannon fodder. And their orcs have high damage, so they're not as skilled as the Empire troops, Vampire troops, or Chaos when it comes to raw stats. They still get the job done. They're cheap to maintain lots of units and large units, so you have usually many armies even if they're not quite as capable on a person per person basis. You can get giant spiders and giants, and in general your units are focused on smashing up the enemy in a really predictable and easy to use way. They have a very limited tech tree. They can't trade. It's all about we're either at war or we're not. And their economic buildings are, they leave a lot to be desired. So you have to produce most of your income from raiding enemy territories and sacking their settlements, which is fine because you want to keep your armies working. Because if they don't, then they start to attrition, which means that your units start to take damage and people die in them, and your military you just become a lot less capable. Should any particular army not fight enough. And if they're fighting a whole hell of a lot and doing really well, you can actually spawn allied bonus armies that you can send against your enemies. Also, of course, you can teleport around using the underway, which is a pretty big deal. Also, they are excellent at raiding enemy provinces, so it's all gravy, baby. Their two leaders are both powerful melee fighters. Grimgor Ironhide has the unique Immortals banner, just a special trait of his that makes one of his Black Orcs in his armies even more badass. And Black Orcs are basically the hardest infantry that the Orcs have to offer, so more badass is real good. He increases movement range of all characters by 5%, which is always good, and reduces the upkeep for Black Orcs and Biggins, which are two of your better melee units, by 10%. So a nice solid pick there. Also, his skill tree lets him specialize in crushing face, as you would expect. Azag the Slaughterer, also a decent melee fighter, not quite as good as Grimgor. He can gain access to the Lore of Death spells, which is otherwise unavailable to the Orc faction, through one of his early quests. Each faction leader has some varied quests which unlock powerful magical items for them. His is the Crown of Sorcery. One of his is the Crown of Sorcery, which will let him unlock a new skill tree where he can get all sorts of death spells, which is great because the death spells focus on breaking morale, weakening enemy units, and causing death. He can also unlock Skullmuncha, a unique flying wyvern, which I assume is pretty boss, nasty monster unit that he rides around on. His faction effects are really good. Income from sacking settlements plus 10%. That's a huge thing for you since sacking settlements is one of your factions. You already gain bonuses to that, and it's one of your faction's primary ways of gaining wealth. Also, diplomatic relations plus 10 with undead may not seem like much, but the undead are the other Horde race besides yourselves, and they can be a real pain in the ass. So improved diplomatic relations is great. Also, they have a lot of nice trade goods, which can make you both a lot of money if, you can't trade with them. So, yeah, whatever. You don't have to worry about the undead. You can fight other people. There are many wars to fight. Their starting units, Goblin Spider Riders, really nice light cavalry with a poison attack that basically debuffs everything about the other troops when they're hit in melee. And the Orc Biggins are these anti-large, that is anti-cavalry and up-sized creatures, and pretty much awesome mid-sized chargey infantry. Grimgor Ironhide's troops, one thing of Black Orcs, really, really powerful infantry. Orc Boar Boys, which are your better cavalry over the goblins, and a Doomdiver Catapult. Definitely, I think he's got the edge in military might right off the beginning. But the access to lore death spells is really potent, combined with his own decent melee abilities. Just a lot more skill points to put into things, whereas Grimgor can focus on being the best Choppa there is. All right, on to the vampire counts. So the vampire counts are, they can spam a whole ton of units, of cheap, weak units. If you just want to overwhelm the enemy with hordes of zombies and skeletons, these are definitely the way to go. Even more the orcs, their units are so throwaway because you can replenish them quite quickly. They have very strong battle magic options. Both of their starting heroes come with at least one magical skill tree to spec into. Almost all of their units, I think all of their units actually reduce enemy morale. Some of them even cause terror when they're attacking someone, causing that unit to automatically flee unless it's somehow immune to terror when it's attacked for a couple seconds. They don't retreat. Their units can't be, their morale when broken does not cause them to run away. They instead take additional damage. They actually take damage whether they're in combat or not if their morale is broken. So it's kind of the same thing, but basically they will stand their ground to the last man every time. However, they will die much faster when flanked and all that. They also, at the end of each battle, raise a couple people from the dead. Even units that were completely defeated, they could get a couple back, which can be a big economic boon. They have no missile units, but they have a lot of specialized units that are either fast or tough or regenerate or something. Or their units are just completely expendable. Strong grasp of flanking tactics and encirclement, I think, is best for these guys, as with those hordes of cheap units, you can just surround and break the morale of everyone. The death spells that they get access to also help break morale. They also get a lot of monsters, like the Vargulf, which is a powerful regenerating monster whose morale can be broken easily. The Terrorgeist, which is a large anti-monster monster that is resistant to non-armor piercing things, as well as poisons and of course other nasty stuff, terrifies enemies. And the Hex Wraiths, with their low health but 75% resistance to physical damage, against the right opponents, the Hex Wraiths can be really devastating because with this low health, it actually makes it really easy. There's a spell that heals undead and resurrects them for a certain amount, and it makes it really easy to actually raise Hex Wraiths from the dead with that spell right off the bat, because they just have such low health. They come back very quickly, and then they're really resistant, so each hit point counts for more for them. While they're moving around the map, they have the Raise Dead ability, which basically lets them raise units generally for equal or lower cost than they would pay for them normally, but only low-level units unless they're around some famous battle site, which I assume the famous battle sites are dynamically generated when large armies clash. Their biggest weakness is probably the corruption mechanic, where vampiric corruption in enemy territory, that is territory you don't own, if it's not very high, then your armies will suffer attrition as you step and move through that territory. So it's hard to invade or even move through allied territories if the vampiric corruption isn't high. Also, controlling settlements where vampiric corruption is low brings a large public order penalty, raising the chance of rebellions and all sorts of other nastiness. Pardon that motorcycle. On the flip side, if vampiric corruption is high, then you will not suffer attrition if an enemy owns that territory. It causes all sorts of problems for that player, like vampiric uprisings, and when you control settlements with high vampiric corruption, then public order is incredibly easy to maintain, far easier than any other faction. So if you want to play some undead spamming, magic casting, slowly corrupting the land type people, then the vampire counts are who you're looking for. they have two leaders. They have Manfred von Karstein, who starts off with more activatable abilities than anyone else, and can specialize in both vampire and death spells, as well as being a solid and dangerous melee fighter due to his vampiric nature. He's got way more skill tree than he knows what to do with, so choose carefully what you're going to specialize in and specialize hard. He comes with campaign movement range, always a solid bonus, and 10% upkeep discount for Grave Guards, your top tier skeleton warriors, and Black Knights, your skeleton cavalry. He starts with a Vargulf monster, notably, which is really strong and very useful early on in the game, especially because it regenerates about 2 health a second when not in combat, so you can kind of use lesser combats as a chance to regain its health, whereas other units will need some sort of replenishment mechanic to do so. Phwop's very fast, good for swarming enemy archers so that they cannot attack you, or even melee units with their really high melee defense. They're quite hard to hit for other units that aren't particularly skilled. And Crypt Ghouls. These guys poison the enemies and otherwise are just fairly standard kind of melee infantry, though they are notably pretty poor against armor. Over here we have Heinrich Kemmler. He is a powerful wizard who has lore of vampires. This is mostly, vampires is the kind of necromantic raising abilities, whereas death spells are mostly like harm and debuff. Heinrich Kemmler specializes in training necromancers, much like the Empire Wizard specializes in battle wizards. And necromancers are super good heroes for the vampire faction. He also is a powerful wizard who starts off with some sick spells and gets access to them earlier. Raise Dead costs, that is of course the ability to recruit cheaply lower level dead units. This means that he actually can get these units cheaper than buying them normally, and without like standing still. He can just raise them and move. It can be an incredibly cheap and effective way of raising a very large army of low-level units early in the game. And later on, when there are more famous battles lying around, I think he can actually raise some pretty sick armies. So nice and cheap replenishment of your forces everywhere you go. And Necromancer heroes cost you less to maintain, which is always good because they are quite expensive. He starts off with some Hex Wraiths, which are great. Like I said, the Necromancy healing and regeneration magic is a perfect fit at the Hex Wraiths, and a perfect fit with the Cairn Wraiths, who are basically the infantry version of Wraiths with that 75% physical resistance, the ability to cause terror and fear, and all sorts of stuff. Plus he gets very fast ability regeneration and the ability to cast spells very often, so that is his superpower, combined with direwolves, who are basically easily deployable light cavalry, good for disrupting enemy ranged units especially. So that is the vampire counts. If you wanna spam, and you want to spam magic and the undead, those are your people. But expansion could be kind of slow. Lastly, we have the Warriors of Chaos. These guys, all of their units are pretty damn good. They're all tough, they deal good damage, they're fairly skilled, they often have solid options in combat, like they have marauders who can throw axes or javelins and are you know, a little subpar light cavalry, but they can still engage in combat fairly well, much better than most ranged units. So they can run down ranged units or harass infantry units. All of the Chaos Warriors are super heavily armored, very, very tough. They don't have many missile options. They have horrific diplomatic penalties with all of their factions. They cannot trade, similar to the Orcs. And their economy is completely based on screwing over other people's settlements. Sacking, raiding, and looting from battle is a huge focus for them, as they don't actually have their own settlements. Instead, each one of their armies is basically a traveling settlement or a horde. The infrastructure and military improvements are built individually within each Chaos Horde. So each Chaos Horde tends to be like specialized and different in their own way, which is pretty cool. It means that it's hard for people to attack your infrastructure without attacking your army, but it also means that if you lose an army, there goes a significant portion of your infrastructure. It doesn't mention this, but also your hordes don't like being next to each other at all and start to kill each other off if you leave them sitting next to each other. So it makes assaulting with multiple armies a very precise, if you don't do it very precisely, then it can cost you a lot of fighting strength, which is exactly what you don't want to lose when you need to take a provincial capital. Also, they have the corruption mechanic. This isn't as limiting to them as the vampiric corruption, as in it only does bad things to other people, and it's always nice to have your own. Every area you have a horde in starts to corrupt. Some of your heroes can actually corrupt things faster. Chaos corruption is bad for anyone who is not you, and good for you. They have a lot of monstrous units, like the Chaos Giant, which is basically a reskin of the Orcish Giant. The Hell Cannon, which is somewhat similar to the Greenskins' Doom Cannon. It has a couple of special abilities that put it ahead, but somewhat tracking missiles that it shoots. And the Chosen, which are just really, really skilled infantry. Like, their melee attack and defense is significantly higher than even the Empire's troops. And the Vampires, who have relatively unskilled undead minions, these guys have almost twice the melee attack and defense of their best units. The game does say initial challenge hard, and I would say that is probably true. You need to have a strong grasp of the basic mechanics to play these guys, but beyond that, I actually think they're not too hard to grasp how to play. Just the nuances of perfect play may be pretty difficult. They have 3 faction leaders, each of which is fairly different. Archaon the Everchosen is the faction leader, so everyone's doing it in his name. He's a powerful melee fighter and leader, and that is true. The Chaos Legendary Lords are all excellent fighters, superior to most other even melee Legendary Lords, except for perhaps the Dwarves, who might be on par with most of them. Archaon comes with increased movement range, as you'd expect, which is always good, and reduced upkeep for Chaos Warriors and Chaos Knights. Chaos Warriors being your middling level warriors, always good to have, but not your most elite of elites. And Chaos Knights, just standard infantry. And Chaos Knights being your solid mid-game cavalry units. Kholek Sun Eater is the most dangerous legendary lord in the game. He is a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. That's the equivalent of a top tier monstrous unit. He starts with almost twice the health of most melee fighters and leaders and does oodles of damage, is very fast. He's his own kind of cavalry. You'll see he's got he's like half dragon, half ogre. And is just an absolute monster in combat, and can spec into being even more monstrous. If you want someone who is going to smash, Kholek Sun Eater is the one you're looking for. He is by far the strongest melee legendary lord in the game right now. His faction effects are, on the other hand, they leave a little bit to be lacking. The upkeep for Dragon Ogre and Dragon Ogre Shaggoth units is reduced. Dragon Ogres are these guys. They're basically shock cavalry. There's only 3 in the unit, but they dish pretty decent damage. They cause fear in enemy, lowering their morale, and they are resistant to missiles, just like their big boss here. Otherwise, they're not horrifically skilled, but the damage they deal is just so good. And they're so tough individually that the unit doesn't really suffer much from damage for quite a while, whereas other units degrade quite quickly with their large number of bodies. And the Dragon Ogre Shaggoths are single creature monstrosities similar to Kolek Suneater himself. So while the upkeep for these units is quite high, so this is a pretty big boon because these are very elite units, you don't benefit from his faction effects until significantly into your tech tree and or your infrastructure tree. And for the most part, your big benefit from choosing him is that he is a gigantic monstrosity. Lastly, we have Prince Sigvald the Magnificent. He is also a powerful melee fighter and leader, more on par with the rest of everyone's melee fighters than these other two, who are a bit beastly for their size. He comes with a +6 leadership value versus humans, which is quite good. There is a lot of humans to fight. I assume Chaos is human as well, for the most part. So that's a lot of leadership bonus, and morale is probably the most important trait in the game, because if you lose it, your unit is completely worthless despite having all their hit points. He also increases the chaos corruption that all characters inflict everywhere they are, which I think can really stack up in the mid game when you have a bunch of heroes and lords running around, and is an easy to overlook but powerful bonus. He also begins with a Hell Cannon, which can do really, really sick damage, and Chosen Halberdiers and Chosen with their really impressively high stats. So a bunch of elite units he starts with. He also, his personal trait, and I haven't talked about the personal trait for every lord, but his personal trait increases the growth rate of his horde, which is quite a big deal. Because growth rate is very hard to improve without raising settlements to the ground, or heavy skill investment. So all in all, for a bit more of an economic focus and maybe a bit more tactical gameplay, Sigvald is the man you want. All right, guys, that covers my brief overview of the Total War Warhammer starting factions. Thanks for watching. If you learned something, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, give us a like. If you want to see more of this series as it comes out, I will be doing more in-depth, like first turn, what should I do, videos for each faction. And I will probably be doing in-depth faction looks as I actually play and gain experience with the factions. So subscribe if you want to see that when it comes out. And until next time, my friends, remember, it's all downhill from here.